Okay, let me try this again. This is actually my fourth time trying this because I suck at this. But I'm going to try to say a few words about the Odyssey. Um, this is not going to be, this is in no way, I should say, this is in no way a substitute for what our regular class is. We're not together and can't interact, and it's just not the same thing. And that's the reality that we're dealing with right now. So I hope that all of you are okay. I hope that all of your families are okay. I am fine. My family is fine. And it just sucks. And that's the way it is. So let's talk about the Odyssey for a little bit. Okay, so let's just run down some of the facts. And yeah, facts is in like best guesses, more or less. The Odyssey was probably composed at some point between the dots and the dots. Some point between, it's a tale that's been around since 1000, 1200 BCE at least. I mean, it's that old, and it's not even originally a Greek tale, but that's another story. But the version that we have was probably written down around 650, 660 maybe, somewhere in that range. Most scholars think that the Odyssey is younger than the Iliad, which means that the Iliad goes back further, but I mean, it doesn't really matter. The point of all this is that this is oral epic. I mean, these are stories that people told to one another, not something like, as we've been doing with Aristophanes, not a plot that someone made up all of a sudden and wrote their play out of, the way that we think of writers nowadays. By the way, I'm coming to you from my kitchen, if you haven't noticed. So there's that. Which is appropriate to comedy. One of the things we haven't talked about is food humor in comedy, and there's lots of it. But maybe we'll save that for a later one. So back to the Odyssey. Homer, if there was a Homer, which there probably wasn't a Homer, round about 800 BCE. So let's talk about the Odyssey. Let's talk about the things that I would like to tie into the larger themes of comedy as we have been discussing them over the course of the semester. Of course, well, there's a number of them, right? There's obviously a ton of them, but so let's start. We'll start from the beginning. Now, I'm not going to go point by point through the Odyssey. I don't do that. I expect you to have already read the work and to know what happens throughout the work. So one of the themes that I'm going to talk about is coming of age, which is a major theme in the Odyssey. The first 4 books of the Odyssey deal with Odysseus' son Telemachus. And because Telemachus is a kid who's on the verge of adulthood, whose mom is being pursued by other suitors, whose dad's status is unaware, and so it all is kind of up in the air, and he has to kind of work out his own way through life. So he goes off, and he has a friendship with Nestor's grandson, who, they make this close friendship, and this is all, it's human experience. It's just lived experience. And it's not just from the male perspective, you also have from the female perspective, right? Because you have Odysseus who washes up in Phaeacia, where he meets the young girl Nausicaa, who kind of takes a thing for him, but he doesn't act on it, which is remarkable for Odysseus, considering how many other women he sleeps with, goddesses, women, etc., throughout the course of the book. So there's part of this work focuses on this kind of like a process of understanding who you are and where your place is. So in this respect, it ties in very closely with the clouds. Because in the clouds, you've got Pheidippides, who was another young man. Now, of course, the clouds is absurd because it's Aristophanes and all that stuff. But like in the clouds, you've got young Pheidippides, who is going through this process of figuring out who he is and where he is in Athenian society and all that stuff. So it's not something that we haven't really looked at or dealt with before. So that's one thing. Now, the second thing that I would like to talk about with respect to the Odyssey is the homecoming, which is kind of the sort of major point of the book. It's all about Odysseus coming back to home. And yeah. I don't know what else to say beyond that. But there are a lot of moving parts in the process. Of course, I've already talked about his son Telemachus, who has his coming of age thing. He has to become a man. Homer spends about 4 books on that process. Gets his BFF and meets older dudes, and they all give him advice and all that stuff. But then you also have, at the same time, the whole larger narrative of Odysseus trying to make his way back to home. And that's a process, to say the least. Sometimes it seems to me that Odysseus really isn't all that interested in getting back home. He does spend multiple years with Calypso on her island, and there's all that stuff that happens too. But again, this fits into the larger narrative of the presentation of Greek comedy. And part of that larger narrative is sex. It just is. I mean, you can't duck around it. I mean, you can't make excuses for it. Like, I could sit here and say, yeah, the Greeks were sexist, which they were. But it's there, and I gotta talk about it because it's my job. So, this is the point of the lecture where I would normally reset, but I don't know how to pause my stream, so I have to keep talking. Odysseus has a string of affairs on his way home. Penelope, who is his wife, doesn't have any affairs at all. And in fact does everything she possibly can to avoid all of the men who are after her. And there are many men who are after her because they all want to be kings of Ithaca. And if they can marry the queen of Ithaca, then they get to be the king of Ithaca and claim Odysseus is dead. So what she does is she fabricates a tale. And fabricate is exactly the word I mean to use, because she's making fabric. She's weaving. She claims that she's weaving a funeral shroud for Odysseus' dad, Laertes, who's not dead yet. He moved out of the household. He lives out with the swineherd, which is a whole another fascinating dynamic to the Odyssey. I mean, there are so many things in the Odyssey that you can talk about and parse and try to figure out. Nobody has figured out everything in the Odyssey because it's a work of genius. So there's that. But she tells all of the townsmen, right? And so here, like, this is a fascinating question with the Odyssey. Why didn't all these dudes go to the Trojan War with Odysseus? Why are they still here? It seems kind of weird. Like, right? Why are these guys who are roughly the same age as Penelope, why are they still here? Why didn't they go to the Trojan War? But it's clear from the presentation of the Odyssey that these guys are less than heroic. And you can tell that by a number of factors. Number one, they are totally inhospitable. So hospitality, sorry, I'm going to hold up signs like this because I don't have a chalkboard here. So let me do it. So what we're talking about here, and some of you have heard me talk about this already who have been in class with me, this is the concept of xenia. Right? So xenia means hospitality. The word for guest is xenos. That same word also means host. It depends on the context. It can mean both guest or host, but the point of the word meaning the same thing, same word being used for both guest and host, is that there's an established relationship between guest and host. Right? So, like, there's no, like, the guest and the host have responsibilities towards one another, more or less. There's expected behaviors of the guest, there's expected behaviors of the host, right? So all of these dudes show up to Odysseus's house under the what turns out to be under the misconception that he's dead, and they are like, we are just gonna blow this place up. Like, we're gonna do our thing. We're gonna take full advantage. And they know that there's nothing Penelope can do because she's the host. And she can't turn them out. She can't do them any harm. Because so they'll come back here. The whole concept of xenia is a sacred concept. So if you screw it up, you're sinning against the gods, and then you're therefore punishable by their wrath and all that stuff that we know from Greek myth. So she can't turn them out. She has to entertain them. So they all take full advantage of this. They just shack up in this household. So they stay there for a long time, 10 years. Again, under the assumption that Odysseus is not coming back, the mistaken assumption that Odysseus is not coming back. And but Penelope's ruse, her fabrication, is that she'll choose a husband after she finishes weaving the funeral shroud, which is like the cloth that you would put over somebody's head when they die, for Odysseus's dad. The great thing about Penelope, of course, is that every day she weaves and every night she unweaves. So the thing never gets done. Pretty cool. Penelope's a badass. No doubt about it. I don't even know where I was going with all of this stuff. Just talking about the Odyssey, I think. Um, what was I talking about? See, this is why I miss you guys. Like, I go down these rabbit holes, and then you're here to tell me, you're talking about this. Anyway, so what was I talking about? Start talking about Telemachus and his coming-of-age story. Talked a little bit about Nausicaa and her coming-of-age story. I didn't really talk about Odysseus and what happens when he's at Phaeacia, which is a whole set of hilarious events. I mean, he almost cuts everyone's head off with a discus and does all kinds of nuts things. And there's the whole Cyclops thing, of course, which has been revisited multiple times. Like, there's been many versions of the Cyclops episode. Probably the most famous one is Euripides' play The Cyclops, which is the same thing that happens in the Cyclops episode of the Odyssey. It's been done and redone. Like the Coen brothers did it in "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" I mean, it's got legs, comedy legs, which are good legs to have. So, at the end of the day, what I want to say really about the Odyssey is the oikeo hedone. Do I need to write this out again? I think I've already put this up on the board. But I will do it again. Oikeia hedone. So you will recognize the word hedone from our English word hedonism, which means loving physical pleasures, though the Greek word hedone applies to other sorts of joys that are not strictly physical, but that's how we use it now. And the oikeia is the home, the household, right, as an economy. So oikeia hedone means the joys of home. And at the end of the day, that's where the Odyssey ends, is in the joys of home, because it's the reunion of Penelope and Odysseus. However, it's not. First, Odysseus as the Heros. Heros doesn't mean the same thing as the English word hero, even though the English word hero derives from it. Odysseus as the Heros has to do tons of things to demonstrate his greatness, if that's what you want to call it. Now, okay, so now here's another thing that we need to talk about when we talk about comedy and the Odyssey. It's Odysseus and his status as a Heros, right? When you read the Iliad, and you run into people like Aeneas or Hector or Achilles, these are men's men, right? These are guys who are like, gotta do the manly thing, gotta fight, even if we die, we have to protect, we have to win. And that's the sort of, I don't want to oversimplify the Iliad, because there's more stuff that happens in the Iliad than just men being men, but like that's kind of the overwhelming, or I would say the dominant ethos, shall we say, of the heroes in the Iliad. Now, when we look at the Odyssey, we get a totally different picture, because Odysseus he throws everyone under the bus, like one after the next. Like excuse me a moment. The joys of teaching from home. He throws everyone under the bus at one point or another. Like he loses all of his men, all of them. And in fact, he's flat out told that he's going to lose all of his men, and he doesn't care. He sails into the Bay of the Lacedaemonians, and he says to one of his ships, "Okay, you go up there and see who's up there. I'm going to hang out back here where I can make my getaway real quick." And what happens? All those guys die. They all die. You know, when they land on Calypso's island, they divide up into search crews, and they're like, "Okay, well, we'll toss a coin and see who goes to see what this hut is all about." And of course, he sends half his other men, and he stays back. So they all get turned into pigs, right? And then he gets bailed out by Hermes, which is also important, I think, thematically, because Hermes is, we talked about this already. Hermes is thief. Hermes is trickery. Hermes is deception. Right? Hermes is go look over there while I go over here. And so some of you will know this from other myths as the trickster god motif. I kind of think that that's a little bit overdone in mythological analysis, but it is there. It's definitely there. Hermes totally bails him out. Hermes tells him, "Here, eat." This is funny. This might be my single favorite part of the entire Odyssey. He gives him a drug. That drug is called Molly. So in Greek, I'm going to run out of paper here before the end of the semester. In Greek, it looks like this. Molu. Right? But normally, when words are translated into English, the Greek upsilon, which looks like our U, is translated as a Y. So it's called Molly. No one knows what it is. No one has any idea. There have been lots of theories put forward on it, but the fact of the matter is nobody knows what it actually is or was. It's just it's myth. So it's myth. But he's given this special drug that will prevent him from being cast under the spell. Did I say Calypso? I meant Circe. Sorry. I'm sure lots of you will correct me next time I see you. Hopefully, which will be soon, I hope. Circe turns all the other men into pigs, but Odysseus is fine because he's given the special drug, and he's also told at the same time, he's basically told by Hermes, I'm going to use some very blunt speech here, and I hope that, so trigger warning. He's basically told to rape Cersei by Hermes. Draw your sword, take her to bed, screw her, and then make your demands. And so there's that. Not pleasant, but this is certainly not the first time we've seen aggressive sexual action in comedy, shall we say. And I can also tell you it's going to get worse when we do Roman comedy. I don't know why, and we will talk about this when the time comes, but I don't know why the Romans thought rape was funny, but they did. Yikes. So there's that whole episode but it's funny too because the guys get turned into pigs, which they basically are anyway. They all die, so who cares, right? And then there's the whole episode, of course, with the Cyclops, which I have already briefly talked about, but in that situation, again, Odysseus puts all of his men in direct harm. I think okay, so I said that like the Cersei thing was hard to take, and that was hard to take, but for me, the worst, like one of the worst parts of the Odyssey, and it's not like worst part, it's just a descriptive thing that happens. It's not intentional on the author's part or anything like that, but like when the Cyclops takes the first of Odysseus's men with the intention of eating them, we are told that what he does is he smashes them against the wall. And when he smashes them against the wall, the comparison is to the way that you would kill puppies. Horrible, from our perspective. Horrible. I'm a dog person. I love dogs. So, like, it hurts me. But when you put yourself in the situation of somebody from about the year 700 BCE or 600 BCE, and you have a dog, and your dog whelps, and you got all kinds of puppies, you can't afford to feed 12 or 13 dogs. Like, it's just not a feasible thing. You probably already have 5 or 6 kids. So, put that in context just for a moment. I'm sorry, I'm totally not on the comedy mode here at all. So what else is funny about the Odyssey? Well, the Cyclops episode is funny insofar as you have the whole nobody scenario going on. So let's talk about the nobody thing here for a moment. So the way that you say nobody, one of the ways, it's not the only way, it depends on where it comes in the sentence because there's subject and object cases and all that stuff. But what he tells the Cyclops is that his name is, this is a long E, Metis. He says, my name is Metis. Okay? So that means nobody. That's two separate words, Metis. This is someone. This is no someone, right? But at the same time, there's another word in Greek, which is written as one word, which is going to look just like the other word I just wrote, although metis is two words. This is one word. Metis. Metis. So this word means no one. But this word, metis, means clever. So who's the joke on now? Like who's laughing now? Cyclops, Polyphemus. And the whole Polyphemus episode, of course, is funny too, because Polyphemus says, I don't want anything to do with civilization. I don't even worship the gods. My dad is Poseidon and no one cares, and I don't even talk to my neighbors. And so that brings us back to this. Hospitality. Because one of the things that the Cyclops does is he refuses to acknowledge the rules of hospitality. When Odysseus is caught in the cave, he demands gifts of hospitality. And the Cyclops says, okay, I'll give you a gift of hospitality. I'll kill you last. So it's kind of funny. At any rate. But of course, Odysseus is always escaping while his crewmates slowly disappear. Even as Odysseus is escaping, traditionally the Cyclops is placed on the island of Sicily, but again, maybe not. Like, it's fiction. So Odysseus calls out to the Cyclops, hey, my name is not really Metis, my name is actually Odysseus. And the Cyclops, who at this stage has been blinded, echolocates the where the voice is coming from, and he almost washes them all the way back to the beach, and he destroys a couple of ships. So this is what I'm getting at. This goes back to what we were talking about with Archilochos, a little bit what we're talking about with Aristophanes. This goes back to the idea of the anti-hero and how funny the anti-hero is. And, I mean, yes, it has to do with the ridicule of traditional ideas of masculinity. Nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with ridiculing masculinity. It's, because dudes take themselves real serious. So, but besides that, outside of that, yeah. So coming back to the end of the Odyssey, it's the Oikeia Hedone. I'll put that up again for you, in case you missed it. The Oikeia Hedone, the joys of home. It's about the reunion of the family unit. It's about the restoration of the fertile construct of union between man and woman. But at the same time, it's also about the growing up of Telemachus. So, all right. So I know I keep saying I got one more thing to maybe only one more thing to talk about, and that has to do with how Odysseus proves his identity. So Odysseus returns back, and he comes back in disguise because Athena helps him out. I haven't even talked about Athena, touched on their relationship, which is whole other freaking ball game. if you read carefully, you will notice the number of times that Homer, our poet, mentions how Athena likes the way that Odysseus's eyes look. There's definitely a thing going on there. But he comes back with Athena's help, without any of his companions. All right, so there's a couple things that I'm going to talk about now. Sorry. He comes back to Ithaca by himself, alone, as the prophecy said, that he was going to return companionlessness by himself and with no possessions. He doesn't come back with no possessions. Athena protects his wealth. I mean, I don't have a straight up explanation for that. That's just what happens in the text, except for the fact that she really digs him. Why does she dig him? Because he's smart like she's smart. And in Greek myth, the tendency is for gods to protect the people who are like them. So Zeus looks out for Agamemnon because Agamemnon's a king, like Zeus is a king. Artemis looks out. Who does Artemis look out for? Sorry, actually, she doesn't really like anybody. But Aphrodite looks out for Paris because Paris is as good looking as Aphrodite is. The list can go on, but in any case, you get the point. So Athena brings Odysseus back home. He gets to his homecoming, and he goes back in disguise as a bum, what we would process nowadays. And I don't mean this in any way disrespectfully, but what we would process nowadays as a homeless person. Like he goes back as a homeless person. He's dirty, he's in rags, he has no house, he has to rely on people to give him things and all of that stuff. And I really don't want to. Right. So, but he knows who he is. And the test at the end of the Odyssey is to string the bow. That's how he's going to prove his identity. There's actually a sequence of... Okay, all right, so let me write this down. You see, I told you I suck at this. This is what we call a recognition scene, okay? And they're everywhere, all over, both comedy and tragedy in Greek drama. It was one of their favorite techniques, and it still remains a technique today. To give you the Greek word for it, this is called anagnorisis. So when you look at this word, you will see this linguistic root, this gno here. That's the same linguistic root as your English word knowledge. Okay? So this is coming to knowledge, coming to an understanding. Anagnorisis. So there are a couple of different recognition scenes in well, more than a couple. There's all right. So I'm not going to go through these in actual order of the book. I'll just talk about them in the ways that they move me emotionally. There's the recognition. The first person that he really reveals himself to is his dad, which is cool. And then there's the recognition scene with his nurse, which is a whole different kettle of fish. She recognizes him by the scar on his leg that she knew he had as a boy. And as soon as she says that she knows who he is, he starts choking her. That's not cool at all. It's quite frightening. And enough said about that. But for me, well, and of course there's his wife and his son that go through recognition scenes. But for me, the most heartbreaking one, and I'm sorry, I'm going back to dogs here. I already told you I love dogs, so is when he gets back and his dog, who has been waiting for 20 years, that's a long time for a dog to live, for him to come back, sees him. Now, remember, he's in disguise. He's not visibly Odysseus as such. He's coming back in rags, and Athena has transformed him into looking like like we said before, like a vagrant, more or less. And his dog takes one look at him and dies. Sad. Sad but happy, I guess. I don't know. You can filter it how you want to. But finally, the final recognition scene is that it's only Odysseus who can string this bow. Like, it's Odysseus's bow. So ask me, I dare you, why didn't Odysseus take his bow with him to Troy? But only he can string this bow in his household. So what stringing the bow means is that the bow is a piece of wood. Okay, it's a cut and hewn long piece of wood, probably about 5 to 7 feet in length. Okay. So you can't keep the string on the bow all the time because the wood will break. You have to take the string off the bow when you're not using the bow to keep the wood useful, or what's the word? I can't think of the word I'm looking for here. Moist, like sort of like flexible, and so you have to unstring the bow. So he's been gone for 20 years. So his bow hasn't been strung for 20 years. So apparently the only person who can actually, so what you have to do is you stand on one end of the bow and you have to bend the other end of the bow down, and then you put the string around one end, and then you put the string around the other end, and just act. So stringing the bow is a feat of strength. But it's not just stringing the bow that matters for Odysseus. It's not just stringing the bow, it's also being able to shoot through 12 axe heads. Now, here, it's easy to misinterpret what's going on here. When Odysseus has to shoot the arrow through 12 axe heads, that he's not shooting through 12 pieces of metal, okay? The way that Greek axes were constructed were like this. I'm going to do my best job here. I've already read on one side of this paper, so don't be confused. Okay, so let me illustrate what I mean to you here. This is the shaft of the axe. So this is a solid piece of wood right here. This right here. Now this is the metal part. But it's not, it has a hole, it's got kind of a hole in it here. Because you had to strap it to the axe shaft. Right, you couldn't if this was a solid piece of metal, it would be impossible to with leather straps to tie this to the shaft itself. So when he shoots through these 12 axe shafts, what he's doing is he's shooting through these holes, through the gaps. So you line the axes up in a line, and you have to shoot the arrow through cleanly through all of the axe heads, right? So stringing the bow is a test of strength. Shooting through the axe heads is a test of skill. And this is very important to understand for the larger themes not of the Iliad, also the Iliad and the Odyssey, right? So the hero has to have two qualities. He has to be strong. In other words, he has to have bia. But at the same time, he has to be smart. He has to be skillful. So he also has to have metis at the same time. And that's what Odysseus demonstrates in his homecoming. I don't think there's anything else I wanted to talk about. We did the Cyclops, we did Circe, we did, I don't know. Okay, so anyway, let me just say this real quickly to you. No one really knows what's happening on campus with school, or like to a larger point in New York City in general. So I am going to post videos. I'm going to do them twice a week, and I'm going to try to keep us as closely as we can be onto the syllabus. I'm not going to do exams until I can see you again. I am just learning how to do this online stuff. In actual fact, if you watch this video, congratulations. This is the first time I've ever done a video. So I hope it was okay. You can email me with questions, but please, if you do email me, please keep things as relevantly, kind of as relevant as possible. Don't email me with nonsense stuff. I have 180 students this semester, so it's kind of, well, you get the point. And yeah, that's basically it. I kind of like doing this. I hope that you liked it too, and that in some way it might substitute for class. And I hope that this all goes away very soon, and I hope that I can see you all again very soon, because I miss you, and I'm not just saying that. I miss being in class, and I love being with you, and I love joking around and horse playing and all that stuff that we do in class. And so take care of yourselves, take care of your families, take care of your neighbors. It's very important. Okay? Be polite, be nice, be generous. And